Good afternoon. I'm sorry. Good morning, everybody. This is Dee Reinhardt. I'm with Illinois WorkNet, and we are going to be talking about incumbent worker training and how to incorporate that into your Apprenticeship Illinois grant. So first of all, if you want to rename yourself on your list on the participants, that way I can ask you or speak to you appropriately. And then all you have to do is click on the participants, click on the more, rename, and then you can add yourself to the organization and or your whole name. If you want to ask a question, you can click on the participants and raise your hand, or if you want to type it into the chat, you can do that as well. I do believe we have the ability for you to unmute yourselves on there, but if you are asking a question, please ask us while we're here working on that section so that we get your question as we're going. We will be talking about incumbent worker training. So I'm going to minimize this right now. And I'm going to, let's see if I can get this presentation actually going and record to the screen. There, we can try that. All right, so welcome everybody. We're talking about Apprenticeship Illinois, and we're talking about incumbent worker training. And incumbent worker training can be counted as part of the system for Apprenticeship Illinois. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how you can go about including that in your numbers. Many of you may be already part of a local workforce investment area, and so you may already be familiar with the Incumbent Worker Training System. If you are not, we will go into a little bit more in depth after we get the basic presentation going. And then if you're already using the system, you're welcome to leave the webinar. We will be recording the whole thing so that you can catch up on it if you want to. If you are not currently familiar with the Incumbent Worker Training System, please stay for the whole thing. So an incumbent worker is an individual or group of individuals with an employment relationship with a participating employer or group of employers in a targeted industry. The individual is receiving an upgraded skills training due to increase his or her skills or to prepare the worker for entry into a new occupation within the targeted workforce. That's a lot of words, but it is basically we're trying to improve that incumbent worker's outlook for their job in this particular industry. As part of the grant, what we want to do is we want to find an employer, create the Illinois Incumbent Worker Training System project, and then we want to add the work sites and workers. So the key IWTS basic is there is a required company match. We'll go into a little bit more detail. The employer and employee relationship is very important. Costs are reimbursed if you are using the actual incumbent worker training system, and then there are allowable costs, etc. For Apprenticeship Illinois, we are working on the numbers for this to incorporate the numbers into the system. A few more key points that we want to talk about is each company must have its own project number. And we have already entered the numbers into the system for your grant. So we are working to make sure that all of those grant numbers are coming through and into the IWTS system for you for this grant for Apprenticeship Illinois. Each project must have at least one work site. Usually there's more, one work site per project. You can have multiple work sites for a project, illustrated in the grid on the right-hand side, the chart on the right-hand side. The required company match is on a sliding scale based on the number of workers at the work site. And we have another slide about that in just a few minutes. Apprenticeship Illinois guidelines. We need to enter the incumbent workers into the IWTS system. And you're going to follow the process for tracking your customers according to Incumbent Worker Tracking System guidelines. The IWTS system will sync with Illinois WorkNet for reporting those incumbent workers on a nightly basis. So when you are entering your incumbent workers, and if you want to check to see if they are tracking properly in the reporting, just wait till the next morning and check the Illinois WorkNet reporting section. And we want to verify quarterly the correct customer numbers are reporting on the Apprenticeship Illinois quarterly reporting system. So let's do a little bit of a demo, and I'm going to minimize this. And on here, this is, I just want to show you, this is the guide for the Incumbent Worker Tracking System. All of the information that you need to actually use the incumbent worker system is all here on this guide. And I have this as a reference in the presentation, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into the chat so that you have this link directly. So this is where all of your resources will be, the directions. I actually am not that familiar with the Incumbent Worker Tracking System, but I used the directions in the PDF that's on here, and I was able to work my way through the system. So I have a test system here that Jerome gave me, and it is, I've already entered some information about the organization. And so what I want to show you is every step along the way, you need to click save when you can save, and you need to enter the information and protect it as you're going along. Look for all of the tabs, look for all of the saves, look for all of the little pieces that might be available. I've already entered all of this data, so we're not going to go through the process of actually entering the data, but we are going to click through the screen so that you can see what you do need to have. So on here, we have to have some layoff aversion. You can edit or add those items, and it has some indicator information here. If you want to just go through the next and previous screens, you can do that. If you want to follow the menu, you can do that as well. So the menu here, all of these gray boxes are the information that you need to have added to the system. And then you will click the review plan before you're done and submit. And at that point, it will tell you, are you missing anything? So we have some NAICE codes that you can add, multiple NAICE codes if they're applicable. And moving on, we have some grantee information that I've already entered. When I was doing this initially, I missed this contacts tab. And so you just have to make sure that you're looking at everything to make sure that you're getting all of the information entered. And click the next button. We have existing project hard to serve groups. I entered some low income and minorities. You can add more of them. Every time you see the red saved checked items, you want to make sure that you click on that and then click on the next. And you can go back in and edit this if you need to. That will, if say you missed a code or you missed an audience, you can go back in and edit. This is existing project credentials. We're probably all going to be picking registered apprenticeship certificate because that's what the program is about. So we can click next. Existing project sectors. I selected manufacturing for this demonstration and I'm going to click next. If you've got multiple industries because you're doing separate projects within an organization, within a business, you can do that as well. We have employee occupations, and click next. We have project occupation upgrades. What are they going to be doing? We can click next. And then we have add or edit employers. I clicked Olin Corporation. My dad retired from there after 55 years. So that is information that is in there that you can enter. We click next. Job upgrade, you want to enter course information. Each tab needs to be clicked on separately to add that information. Click save when you've got that in there and click next. And then you can review your project. Once you have all of that information in there, if you have missed anything, there will be a red box at the top that says what you've missed. And then you can go back and fix those particular items. Read it, because I had to read it 3 different times to make sure that I was getting the right information in there. And then you can submit your project. So if I go down to the bottom and I click on the submit button, then I would submit my project. And as you can see over here on the right-hand side of the screen, I have already submitted it. So now what I want to do is I want to show you how to add employees. When we are in this screen, it's saying who the employer is, what the work site is. If you have more than one work site, you have the ability to drop down and pick from that work site. We can filter for existing people by keywords. You do have the ability, when you're adding information in there, in the initial submission, you can add employees right then. If you want to add an existing person by social security number from a previous project, you can do that. If you want to add a new person, you can do that. I'm going to add a new person right now. And I'm going to select one of my test people. So I'm going to pick Mary Cruz. Email address is optional, but I'm going to enter it in here. Length of employment as of project start date, we're going to say 6 months or more. Education level, we have a couple of choices to pick from, and we're going to pick that one. Social security number is, oh, I got to put it in there the right way. And the zip code, I believe that was this one. Date of birth. This is going to be I'm making up a name here. Military status. And then ethnicity, you can pick more than one. And after you have entered the information in the employment for the organization, as you're entering the basic information, you will be entering the SOC codes that you will be selecting from here. Will training update occupation? Yes. And update occupation, we're going to pick that one. Check this box if you are going to add multiple employees. I'm not going to add multiples right now, so I'm just going to click save. Disability status is missing. Jerome, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. All right. And then, so since we picked none, if I do pick a yes, then that other piece would pop open for me to select the category. So see, I made a boo-boo and it told me what I needed to fix. And so then I've got this next piece. So now tomorrow morning, the sync would happen and that person would be in my list on Illinois WorkNet. And we're going to save these checked items. So I just entered the training for this person for that class, and then I can select the next course and add those. And then we have the training in there. So we registered them, we added employees. Now, the reports are a little bit more important, and we will be doing them quarterly. So we will be having another training on the reports, and that is on the front page of the Apprenticeship Illinois, the front page with where the training sessions are. And Diane Schuler, I apologize if you had that up there earlier. Let me unmute you so that you can ask your question. So I just asked to unmute you if you want to talk to us.
Going back to the project plan, before you submitted it, I believe on the credential screen, there's a place to do registered apprenticeships. Yes. Is that where
Yes.
you were?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, if you're doing an incumbent worker training project with, a first set of first-year apprentices, and there's no guarantee you're going to fund the second year, do we still mark that?
Mike, that's a question that you'll need to answer because that's an incumbent worker question.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's what we were aiming for. So
Okay.
even though you may not fund the full, breadth of the training, you would just mark that in your project description.
Okay.
Is that, that's the end goal.
Okay. Okay, and we would have to, in order to correct that, we would have to do a request to modify the project plan, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that question. Okay, what I want to do now is go back to the PowerPoint presentation and let Michael Baker, do his piece here. So we've got some, now this is the point where if you are already using incumbent worker training, you're welcome to stay. If you are not using it, please stay. All right, so Mike, I'm going to drive if you are ready to proceed.
Sure, absolutely. And as Steve mentioned, if you're already doing incumbent worker training, this is going to be a massive review. But if you are new to it, you definitely need to know these things before you go off the rails and end up in a world of hurt. So following this along with this now will keep you out of trouble later. So first of all, and of course, as soon as I start talking, I get an unstable internet.
I can hear you fine, Mike.
So, okay, well, let me know as soon as, if anything goes awry. I'll keep my eye on the chat window also. So in the links that were provided to you earlier, one of them takes you to the e-policy part of Illinois WorkNet, where the policy letter and the definitions that govern all of this in Illinois reside. Sometimes when I go to e-policy, I can't get to all of the information. I'm not sure, I'm sure it's operator error on my part, but I do want you to know how to get into the details. So if you go to the link at the bottom of this slide, and this will be distributed, so you'll have it. And Dee, if you want to put that in the chat, feel free. You can go to the e-policy, and then the incumbent worker is buried in Chapter 7, Program Services, under Training, Work-Based Learning, and then Incumbent Worker Training underneath that. To open up these pieces, you just click on the right arrow, and then the items below that will open up. So this is the part over here to the right, 7.2.2.3, that you all need to pay attention to. So we won't go into all those one by one and in great detail, but I am going to cover kind of the basics of what you need to be aware of. I want everybody to understand the information on the slides is kind of higher level, and there are some details that time and space don't allow us to cover. So you definitely, if you've never done this before, I encourage you to go to the policy letter and make sure that you are familiar with this going forward before you get off the rails. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to cover, and Dee, you can click through these real quickly, the rest of the slide, there's 6 or 7. We're going to cover the golden rule of incumbent worker training, how it's defined under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the details on company match, costs that are allowable, how you select the training provider and the contract with the company, and how we handle payment, and that's it. Okay, so here's the golden rule, and you can go ahead and click a couple times here. The golden rule is that the training has to make the company and the workers more competitive, and that means through increased productivity, increased efficiency, especially when we're talking about workers, a tangible skill upgrade, okay? So as long as the workers are getting a tangible skill upgrade, and through that, that's going to make the company more competitive, you're solid. So you got to meet those first 2 basic requirements from the get-go. If you've got that covered, you're in good shape. Okay, next slide. Okay, one more click. Okay, another click. Okay, so I'm going to endeavor not to read slides to you, but be mindful that in order to be an incumbent worker, by definition, you've got to be employed by the employer that's participating in the project. So that means you've got to have that employer-employee relationship established. And why that matters is it's not just enough for the worker to be employed. In incumbent worker training, it differs from regular workforce training. In regular workforce training, our relationship is with the individual. The individual signs up to participate in the program and is enrolled and gets services. These people are not enrolled in WIOA like individuals are. In incumbent worker training, the relationship is with the company, okay? And you're providing the training for the company workers, in response to a need that the company has identified, okay? So this apprenticeship, incumbent worker training approach is a little bit of a hybrid of both of those, but I just want to call to your attention that if you're working with an individual, working with a worker here, you also, by definition, you've got to be working with their employer. Also, there is a federal requirement that the person has to have been working with that company for 6 months in order to be appropriate for this kind of training. You don't have to worry about that anymore in Illinois for the next 2 years. We got a waiver on that. So the reason I put it in here is, like, if somebody brings up the idea, if you're talking with a company or talking with other folks that are used to doing this, that may not be up to speed on this, they may bring up the idea, well, no, they have to be working with us for 6 months for this to be appropriate. So you're armed with the knowledge that we have a waiver in Illinois that went into effect July 1 that eliminates this requirement for us. Now, no other state has this so far as I know of, but we don't have to worry about it here. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the whole point of incumbent worker training in that employer relationship is the company has to have some skin in the game, okay? And you can do, I think, one more here. Yeah, this is the same information, but in a more visual way to look at it, okay? If the work site, and we measure the number of workers at a company by numbers at the work site, okay? So if there are 50 or fewer workers at the work site, then the company owes 10% as their required match. And then you can see as the company size gets larger, the required match gets higher. Now these are minimums, so you are free to negotiate a higher reimbursement rate or a higher match rate, not reimbursement, but a higher match rate with a company based on its situation, okay? So consider this the floor, but you can go higher if you wish. Okay, next slide. Okay. So how can a company provide that match? They could make cash payments, in-kind contributions, but most often, and by most often I mean 99.5% of the time, a company meets its required match by paying wages for its workers while they're in training. Okay. Now what that means is, effectively, the program ends up paying for 100% of the training cost because the match is met by just paying their workers what they ordinarily would have been paid anyway, okay? So it's a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure you're all clear on that, is that while there is a required match, if the match is met fully through training wages while they're in training, then it's okay if the program pays 100% of the training costs, okay? If by chance the company can't meet the required match through wages alone, then they could make a cash payment, or you could lower the amount, of the reimbursement to them in order to get them to the level that they need to be. Okay. So again, 99.5% of the time, that's how companies meet the required match, is through paying wages. Okay.
Mike, we have a question.
Okay.
Hospital departments, example, pharmacy or nursing, have separate budgets and personnel costs. Does the department employee number count or the total hospital employee count?
That's a good question. And the answer is the total hospital employee count. So it's the total number of workers at the site. That's a good question. I've never had that one come up before. That's a good one.
It is excellent.
Okay, so what kind of costs are allowable, okay? And the policy letter that I referred to earlier goes into more detail on these items, but in general, here's what you can do, okay? I do encourage you to go look at the policy letter because there are some nuances to, like, instructor fees and some of these other things, but by and large, if it falls into this area, it's okay. The thing to keep in mind is that the cost is for extraordinary cost to the company, okay? Some larger employers have their own internal training departments, okay? So we try to avoid the corporate welfare approach and reimbursing companies for activities that they already have the resources set aside to do. Okay, and the policy letter goes into some detail on what's allowable and what's not. So you should definitely take a look at that. The idea there is that if we've got smaller companies that don't have their own internal training departments, you're trying to balance, taking care of the companies that truly need the support versus ones that don't really need it to survive or get by. Okay. But again, the policy letter has more details on that. Okay, next slide.
Oh, we missed travel.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's okay to pay travel expenses for trainers or for workers to go to travel to training if it's outside their normal commute. Okay. Other costs that are reasonable and necessary, if you had to rent a training facility, or, and this is kind of a nuanced one, say a company had to take its own equipment offline to handle the training. You're training on the company's own assembly line or using their own equipment, and because you're doing training, that product and all that stuff is coming off of production, so there's a cost to the company for that. They can count the value of that time toward their required match. So that's another way they could meet the match if wages alone won't get there. Okay, procurement. So this is in the law, so that's why we're covering it, but I don't want y'all to get hung up on it. But what this is saying is that you've got to check the market to make sure that what we are paying for is allowable and a prudent use of public funding, okay? So typically the grantee or the company itself may have already tested the market, may have already kind of done its own internal bidding process, whatever it might be. You just got to make sure that what we're funding is appropriate, okay? And typically, like especially if you're going toward a registered apprenticeship, that registered apprenticeship already has providers and programs set up. So that's very straightforward, and you can cite that as you're using an approved apprenticeship program as the training provider here. Sometimes it's the company itself is the training provider, okay? So it doesn't mean that they have to go outside. If they're doing the training themselves, that's fine. You just have to say, okay, that's the situation, and we looked at that, and the costs of that are appropriate. Okay, so you just got to follow that policy and just mark it down, and that yes, we know that this is like almost like a sole source kind of situation if the company itself is doing the training, and just document it, and you're good to go. Any questions on that? Okay, if not. Okay, the employer contract, you've got to have it in writing with the company as to what it is you're going to end up paying them for, okay? So the contract needs to identify who's providing the training, what training will be provided, basically it's the who, what, where, when, and how. So Dave, you can keep clicking through here. So basically this is just putting in writing all of the things we've been talking about, the match, the training itself, who's providing it, and an agreement with the company that they're going to give you information for the system in a timely fashion. Okay. Next.
Oh.
And as Dee mentioned earlier on in one of the first slides, payment here is on a reimbursement basis. So the company pays for the training, and then gives you the documentation indicating, okay, here was our contract, here's the training we paid for, here's the cost, here's the proof we paid for it, and then you have all that documentation, then you can reimburse them for the training. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Next.
So now we've got some resources available for you. If you have questions about the Incumbent Worker Training System, LaToya McCrae is your contact person. She just had a baby, so congratulations to LaToya. Jerome is filling in for her until she returns from maternity leave. But that is the contact information for IWTS itself. If you have any questions about your Incumbent Worker Training Program, you'll need to contact your official DCEO grant manager. And Mike, there's different people for different areas of the state. Is that correct?
Yes, but there's typically a grant manager for a single series of grants. So that should be identified to all of these grantees already. If you don't know who your grant manager is, then we need to get you that information.
All right. And then we have for the Apprenticeship Illinois Partner Guide, this is the link for that. We also have, if you have questions about the Illinois WorkNet system, I am your contact person, and there is my email address and my office and mobile numbers. And that is the information that we have available for you today. So do we have any additional questions? Patty, would you like to say something, or anybody else on the team need to ask a question or answer a question?
I don't have anything additional to offer today. Thank you.
All right. All right. Mike, any last words?
No. Best of luck to everyone. This is actually relatively straightforward. Once you get into it, you ought to find it relatively easy to handle. We have hundreds and hundreds of incumbent worker projects done across the state by local workforce areas every year. And it's a great way to help individuals and companies be competitive in the global economy. So best of luck to everyone.
The last thing I want to show you is the Apprenticeship Illinois Partner Guide. We do have a whole load of resources for you. We do have a link to the Customer Support Center. We have a link to the public Apprenticeship Illinois pages that was created out of the brainchild of the Workforce Investment Board group. We have a set of quick start guides for you. We have partner trainings and materials, and this video will get posted there. The full list of resources is available with all PDFs that we keep up to date. And then as we're making updates to our tools, they will be hosted here. For the calendar, we have today's meeting right here, the link to have joined the webinar if you wanted to do that. And then any upcoming technical assistance sessions will be listed here. And all you have to do is click on the join now to join that particular webinar. And as you can see here, on October 14th, we will be talking about IWTS reporting. So if you are only working with incumbent workers, please make sure you jump back on that day. And otherwise, if you are an intermediary or a navigator that is working with regular case management, please join us for the other sessions. Tomorrow, we will be talking about, at 2 o'clock, the intake and eligibility review and the referral process for WIOA services, our dashboard, and our career plan. So thank you for joining us today. I don't see anybody typing anything else in the chat, and so we will stop our presentation and post it to the resources for you. Have a great rest of your day.